Hey everyone, this is the Halifax Real Estate Podcast. My name is Jason Paul and I'm a licensed realtor at Keller Williams Select Realty in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I'm here to help you gain a better understanding of real estate in Halifax and introduce you to a wide variety of people that work in or with our industry as well. Derek, the Septic Doctor Hale, is an expert in all things septic tanks. Derek's business, the Septic Doctor, which he and his wife Kara founded in 2016, offers septic inspections, dye testing, location, tank installations, and repairs. Please welcome the good doctor himself, Derek Hale. Hey Derek, how are you doing?
We're doing fantastic, my man. What's up?
What's going on, my man? So we're having Derek on today to talk about septic fields because not a lot of people know very much. So Derek, I guess my first question is, why septics?
Why septics? In terms of a career choice?
In terms of a career choice. It seems odd. You're dealing with shit.
Lots of people say it's a shitty business, and the thing that I've come to learn over the years is I've seen a lot of shit, so I know my shit. But I also like to educate people along the way as we do the inspection. It's not just an inspection that I'm performing. I like to make this an educational session because a lot of people have never ever been on a septic system. You get a lot of clients out of town people. You get people that are city people that have never ever had the luxury of a septic system or an on-site sewage treatment system. And basically, city and municipal services, what you flush just goes down the drain. It goes out to a sewer main in the middle of the street, and then where it goes after that, most people just say, to a sewage treatment plant. But the cool thing about this is I've built a business and I do the construction and the install work. I do repair work. I do the inspections, of course. And by doing the inspections, I not only can identify the problems and issues that arise with the septic system, but I can also offer the affordable solution to repair those problems, because everybody in the industry says, oh my gosh, what do I do? My inspection came back with, we had a line sag. But, when I come, the beauty of it is because of my experience and my background and the ability to perform those repairs, I can at least say, you know what, it's not the end of the world. It's a line sag. That's pretty easy. That's something you can almost fix with a pick and shovel. So, you know what, I've had a great time working in this industry, and I found it be, for me, it's my niche. And I guess that's kind of what I've ran with. And I love the inspections because I have the opportunity to meet and educate people. When you've got people that you meet on the daily basis that are buying homes, it's a great industry if you're a people person, and I love it.
I love to hear that. So you brought up city slickers who don't know much about septics. Uh-huh. I am, in fact, one of those. Grew up and born in Halifax my whole life. So what actually is a septic system for those people that don't know?
So the definition of a septic system is, in the province of Nova Scotia, most rural houses are on an on-site sewage treatment system. And what it is, it's composed of a few different items. So I guess in the grand scheme of things, we'll give you the Coles Notes version. You flush the toilet, everything leaves from a pipe and comes to a big tank. And typically it's about 1,000 gallons. In the province of Nova Scotia, we're required to have a minimum tank size of 650 for a 3-bedroom home or less, of course. 1,000 gallon is our typical tank sizing, and typically we have a 2-chamber tank. There's an inlet side, and then there's the outlet side. So in the inlet side, that separates the liquids from the solids. So the solids remain in there, human waste, toilet tissue, other things that get flushed that shouldn't be, but of course, at the end of the day, we can't control what our children are flushing down the drain.
Or the adults.
That's right, exactly. So, needless to say, the one chamber is typically where the pump truck operators will suck the solids out. And then, of course, liquids go to chamber 2. And then, of course, so your typical septic tank size is about 6 feet deep, 8 feet long, 4 feet wide. So basically the thing is, it's always going to keep an equilibrium. Once it gets filled to the point that it reaches the outlet pipe, we flush the toilet, 10 liters of liquids come in, 10 liters of liquids will exit. So that goes through the outlet pipe and goes to the distribution trench, which is where the treatment and purification of the effluent fluids take place. So the septic field is usually constructed of a bit of sand for filtration. it has a bed of gravel, which is typically 1-inch clear stone, and the water trickles through that. And of course, on top of the gravel is your perforated piping, and the water does an equal distribution throughout the pipe, hits the gravel, and then goes through the sand for treatment. So anything that we're flushing basically has to be purified before it turns into purified groundwater yet again.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's a big process, man.
So simplified. Now, I know you're the guy we always work with and the biggest name in the industry for doing septic inspections. So when you're inspecting a septic system, how does the process work and what are you looking for?
So we look at every possible thing that we can. So in the real estate industry, it's now written into the agreement that the seller is responsible to make the septic tank accessible. All access ports need to be easily accessed.
I love that you say that because that's not the case.
That is never the case. Well, in the odd one.
The odd time.
Right.
The last one we did together.
Yeah. I do a lot of digging, hence the fact I've got this beautiful summer bod of arms on me. Just kidding. Anyways, it is a good workout plan if you want to come to work with me. I have great starting rates for new employees. Anyways, needless to say, so here's what we're looking at. Tank's got to be exposed. There's usually an inlet cap to access the inlet pipe, which is coming from the house. And then there's the outlet cap on the septic tank, which gives me accessibility to the outlet pipe that goes to the distribution trench or septic field, which is also commonly known as the leach field or the distribution trench bed. Yet there's so many names, like everybody just, they call it what they want. So what we do, step one, we put the camera in and we run it from the tank towards the house. So we're running it uphill. But what we want to look for is that the pipe demonstrates a minimum of 2% slope from the house to the tank in accordance to Nova Scotia Department of Environment regulations and standards for on-site sewage treatment system installation. So how do I tell if there's 2%? No, my camera doesn't tell me. There's no leveling gauge or anything. What we're looking for is there's no sags in the pipe. There's no dips. We don't want to see cracks. We don't want to see any deflection, pipe joints that are not properly connected. So if we have 2% slope, there shouldn't be any standing water in the pipe. If the pipe was level, we're going to see some pipe laying there. But anyways, I will say about 7 out of the 10 houses that I inspect will have a little minimal amount of water collected in the pipe. Small amounts, not a big deal. But if you have a sag that's, an inch or greater, that's always the potential for a blockage or a clog to occur. And of course you don't want that. But the other thing is it restricts the airflow from the interior plumbing through the roof vent on the top of the home. Everything's kind of tied in together. So hydrogen sulfide gases within the tank expel through that pipe. So if there's a full sag, a 4-inch dip in that 4-inch pipe, you're not going to have the ability for the exhaust gases to leave the tank, which is obviously it doesn't help in the decomposition of the human waste solids and everything else in the tank. So you need oxygen in the tank. That's beneficial for composting to occur. Step 2, we look at the tank, interior walls, check the baffles, make sure that, there's no any structural damage. The integrity of the tank isn't compromised. People drive over septic tanks and crack them. In the excavation process to expose the tank for my inspection, I've seen people that have cracked and broken tanks with excavators. So we look at that. And again, hydrogen sulfide gas can cause internal corrosion to the tank. It eats the concrete. And that's why exhausting those gases is very important and why sags from the host of the tank aren't a good thing. So they need to be corrected. And then I guess going to the third step, we go from the septic tank through the outlet pipe towards the distribution trench, septic field, leach field, drainage bed, whatever it may be called. And then we scope it. We check the pipe to make sure there's no standing or residual water within the pipe or the field. And then we conduct a load test and a fluorescent dye test. So the load test, what we're trying to mimic is, a household of 4 on a Saturday morning when you're flushing toilets, you got laundry, dishes, showers, everything's going. I usually do an extended test compared to some of my competitors. I do about 20 minutes or 80 gallons of water flow consistently. And we want to just make sure that it maintains a consistent level and it doesn't elevate, it doesn't submerge the camera. Because otherwise we know that we have a slow draining bed or we might have bed saturation. And the purpose of the fluorescent dye that we put in at the same time is to look for leaks on the surface or downslope to the field because, last thing you want is sewage discharge and effluent leaking the dog's going to run through it. The kids are probably going to play with it. It doesn't smell great. So those are all things. And of course, it's illegal. A malfunction system is a leaky system, and you don't want that to cross-contaminate with your drinking water.
Oh, yeah, because septic's on well.
Oh, yes, absolutely. In most cases. There
Most
is the odd
cases.
case.
Yeah. Oh, my. Okay. I guess the next question is, and this comes up a lot, is when I have a buyer and we're going through a septic test, the worst case scenario I never always worries about if it fails. Okay? Now, run us through a scenario where a system has failed in your experience. What is usually the solution depending on the failure?
So typically, I mean, sometimes people have a misconception of a fail versus a pass. If there's a line sag, in most case scenarios, you're talking a $400 to $1,000 repair. So
That's not
people are
bad.
like, oh, my system failed. Well, no, your system didn't fail. You have a sag. That's an easy fix. And again, sometimes we have to do them with picks and shovels on our stomachs beneath decks. So, it's not the end of the world. Everything is repairable. When people say, oh my gosh, this is terrible, do I still buy the home? It's like, you know what? It's all easy fixes. Like, septic systems aren't that big of a deal to me because obviously I'm in the industry and I do it every day. But people get worked up and stressed out over it. Just, deep breath, relax. It's not that big of a deal. So the easy fix, line sag. If the septic tank is broken, cracked, it's not retaining the liquids because you have to have a watertight tank again, that's in accordance to Nova Scotia Department of Environment standards. A tank is a $4,000 replacement. That's
actually not bad.
It's not the end of the world. But, when you're getting into bigger numbers, when you're talking 5 digits, a septic field is typically 15 to 20,000, contrary to the whole, people, there's a whole, idea that septic systems are like $30,000 to $40,000. That isn't the case unless you have a really, really unique situation that we need to put a specialized system in. And I think the worst price I've ever seen in my own installations has been like $32,000, taxes included. So, and that's a very rare case, maybe once or twice a year. Out of the 70 some odd systems we did last year in 2019.
You did 70 systems last year?
70 installs. The boys have been busy.
You installed 70 septic tanks?
True story, man. Yeah, we're cranking them out anyways. We rush so you can flush. Remember that.
Oh, my God.
Oh, my. Well, the thing is, everybody's got to poop, so you got to have a good working septic system. But, your typical failure, what happens is you'll usually find that most systems will be saturated. So as I insert the camera again, let's go back to what I talked about when we put the camera in the outlet and go towards the field.
Yep.
We're looking for a dry pipe, relatively, no residual standing water. We want to get to the distribution trench, and we want to see those perforations in the pipe. The odd case, you're going to push it further and further and further, and systems work on a principle of progressive failure. So as the system fails at the ends, it works its way back towards the center, and that's when you're going to probably find some standing water. So worst case scenario, I had a couple of them today. You put the camera out, the camera's underwater. I opened a lid today, and the outlet pipe was completely submerged. And I said to the agent, you know what we're looking at? She says, that doesn't look good. I don't think the water's draining out of the field, towards the field. So she knew because of experience and working with me for so many years, again, it all comes back to how I try to educate people and work through the whole process as we do the inspection. But, saturated is one failure. Of course, that's not illegal because everything's being retained. You just basically have a bag of milk underground, and if I were to dig a little hole or put my stone bar in and puncture it, it's gonna cause a blowout. Second sort of failure, of course, in my industry is a complete malfunction. Of course, a malfunction in the standards and Nova Scotia Department of Environment regulations is a system that's discharging untreated sewage and effluent onto the ground surface, into a brook, into a stream, into a ditch, or on the lawn kind of thing. And that's when that becomes a legality, and it needs to be replaced. It needs to technically be reported within 15 days of the findings, but it needs to be
Who's in charge of reporting them?
Well, honestly, it's it says in the standard the homeowner is responsible.
Yeah, I was gonna
to
say
report it.
because I mean, if you're buying that, if you're trying to buy the house, so you find out the septic's failed and it has to be reported.
Yes.
Do you just get that information? Are we supposed to just because I haven't been in the situation yet personally, but if we just have to, do we give the information to the seller and they're supposed to?
So technically, that's the way it works. The seller or the homeowner, the property owner is responsible to basically report themselves.
Yep.
And call the
Okay.
provider. But really, how many people will just call the police on themselves? They're not going to do that. So in the real estate world, everything will always work itself out because now you have a seller who's motivated to sell their home. You have a buyer that's like, I want this home, but I don't want it with a leaky septic. So in the negotiation process, it always figured itself out. And that's why we have real estate agents to negotiate those things that occur, such as a septic system that needs replacement. So I've never actually had to report any septic systems, even though it is my due diligence as a QP2 and a septic inspector and a licensed installer. I'm technically supposed to report those, but again, it always sorts itself out.
Always.
So it's not my responsibility at that point.
I mean, as soon as we go back to the table and say to the sellers, listen, you're about to, it's $20,000 for a brand new septic system. Work with us or go back to market.
Yeah, exactly.
And you have to disclose.
And it's a huge kick for somebody to spend 20 grand on a house you want to sell. That's kind of a bad thing. But I mean, you know what? If it's not fixed for this current buyer, it's got to be fixed for somebody else.
Exactly, and that's the point.
That's it.
When a septic fails, let's say you're a complete fail, new install, how long does that take?
So the permitting application basically has to go through an engineer, which is a QP1, a professional engineer, and they have to have the septic system design delegation to their credibility. So I work with an engineer for my own system designs. I've worked with Able Engineering since 2009. That's when I actually got my septic installer's license. And basically what has to happen, the whole process is step one, we organize a test pit. And basically I myself personally will show up on the property with a mini excavator, usually a 3.5 ton, something you can haul behind a pickup truck. We show up, I have to dig a test pit, and we dig a hole that the engineer like crawls down in. It's about 5 feet deep, and he has a soil sample analysis. Basically, he looks at the soils, and this has to be reported to the Department of Environment so they know that we've actually done our due diligence and checked. Because, you know, in most scenarios, back in the day, people just threw whatever was easy and cheapest. But this is the whole process now that you have to have a soil test to see what the permeability rate is, how it's going to drain. If it's clay, you know, it's not going to drain very well. If it's sandy, you have great soil to work with. So basically, that's step one. Engineer designs a system, and it has to meet the necessary clearances. It's got to be 50 feet from a drilled well, 100 feet from a dug well, 20 feet from a foundation or foundation drain, at least 3 meters from a property boundary, downslope boundaries. You know, we've got all these regulations. We try to be 100 feet away, 30.5 meters from a water course, you know, bog, brook, stream, ocean, lake. But, you know, in some case scenarios, when you're trying to install a replacement system, you can't always abide by those rules. So the way the environment looks at it is if you have to bend the rules for a replacement, then, you know what? You do what you have to do to make it work so you have proper treatment of the effluent. So that's step one. They design a system. They draw up the permit. They send it off to environment. Approval comes in. That's usually a 2 to 3 week process. But the installation is really the fast part. We usually show up with our equipment. I order the materials once the septic area is excavated. Day one, we excavate. Maybe at the end of the day or next day, we get the sand and all the necessary materials and gravel show up. And then usually, like maximum, it's a 3-day process unless it's a special situation where we run into different sort of system that we have to order pieces and parts for, like a peat unit or something like that. So yeah, it's not a big process. Again, I say this is an easy thing. It's not a big deal, but to most people, and
overwhelming.
It's very overwhelming. Yeah, 100%. And that's what scares people about septic. You've been on city and municipal, you flush it. It goes away. It goes away. Where's it go? But now you're like, oh, what do I do? But again, it's all how you treat and maintain the system and what's going in. Certain products, you just want to be certain that you're not putting the wrong things in there.
Okay, so I'm going to backtrack to one thing you said. about the engineer designs a system.
Yes.
Is that? I thought. Now, my understanding was that it's like one size fits all. So you guys actually go in and figure and design the system that fits a specific property.
Absolutely. So basically, a septic system is designed appropriate to A, soil conditions, B, slope. It has to be at least 1 meter above bedrock and groundwater table, because you don't want to install a septic system in a situation where you have a lot of groundwater. If you're going to put a new system in, why would you put it below water table? Well, it's not going to drain. So you need 1 meter separation, and that's why it comes about that sometimes we have to put a system in with a pump chamber. So the liquids are being pumped uphill because we're trying to get that vertical sort of separation. So basically, a 3-bedroom home, 1,000 liter a day flow rate is the minimum requirement in the province of Nova Scotia. So if you're going to have a 4-bedroom home, usually in a new installation, you're looking at 1,500 liters a day. But if it's a replacement system for a 4-bedroom home, only on account of the fact that we're working with low flow fixtures now, toilets, sinks, shower heads, you can bump that down to 1,350 liters a day. So, the number kind of jumps 350 liters every time. So if we're going 5-bedroom, we want to go with like a 1,700 liter, 1,750, something like that. And it just goes on. If you're talking multi-unit, now we almost have to look at it as we're going to do a larger system, because, you could potentially have 4 people in one unit and 4 in the other, even though the whole house is only 4-bedroom.
Whew.
I know, there's a lot to it. I'm sorry. Am I overwhelming you?
Not at all.
Okay.
Oh man, I just didn't realize that you guys actually like specifically installed them per houses. I thought it was just like one size fits all, new septic put in, you're good to go. Shows my ignorance.
The way you got to look at it is, so you could have a 1-bedroom home with 10 bathrooms, but there's still probably only going to be 2 people sleep in that 1 bedroom, but you're not going to fill the bathrooms with people sleeping there. If you have a 10-bedroom home with 1 bathroom, you now have to have a septic system sized accordingly. They'll accommodate all the occupants within those rooms. So technically, if you want to think about it this way, 10-bedroom home, you could probably sleep 20 people. So that's why the daily flow rate has to increase.
Okay. You mentioned maintaining your septic. So for anyone that's never owned a septic before, how do you maintain the quality of your septic? Or like, is there something you should worry about flushing, or things you shouldn't worry about flushing? Like, what's that process look like to you?
So I guess number one, let's start about the things that do go down the drain. Number one, whatever you put in the toilet, number one or number two, I guess, basically.
Yeah.
Toilet tissue is permitted. I guess you don't want to flush Q-tips. You don't want to flush latex contraceptives. You don't want to flush feminine hygiene products. You definitely don't want to pour your turkey pan fats and grease down the drain, because what it does is coagulates all the interior plumbing pipes. And this is true story. I've seen this. A 4-inch pipe that was basically at a 13-year-old home. The homeowner constantly poured bacon fat down the drain. When I did the inspection, we have a 4-inch pipe that is basically downsized to a 1-inch opening, and it looked like the image of a coagulated artery that you would have seen in your biology book in university. It's incredible.
13 years.
13 years. You now have a pipe from 4 to 1, basically. So that's how easily the pipes can become filled with debris and collect all this grease and fat. So you don't want to flush that stuff, because if that's doing that to your plumbing, imagine what it's going to do to your septic system. It's so anything that's non-decomposable. I always emphasize to people, even during the inspection process, say, look in here. Look, there's a candy wrapper. That's a no-no. Why? Because candy wrappers shouldn't be flushed down the toilet. You see all kinds of unique things. There's lots of stuff. I've seen blockages that the outlet didn't drain because, I don't even know how to say this without being embarrassed about it, but there was a complete ball of condoms. And when there's a ball of condoms blocking your outflow, your septic system isn't going to drain properly. So those are, again, I kind of go back to I see a lot of shit, and I have.
I believe.
There's awkward situations with clients. It's like, they're like, oh, I have a blockage. What do I do? Well, maybe you shouldn't be flushing these items. And
down the toilet.
Yeah. The best one I found, I pulled my camera out one day from the septic field, and there was a pair of tiny little blue undies, probably from like a 5-year-old or something. So think about it this way. You flush a pair of underwear, kids' underwear, down the toilet. It makes its way through an 8-foot long septic tank that's 6 feet deep, gets into the outlet pipe and goes to the field. Like, that's pretty incredible. So that's why you have to be very mindful of the things. And, you know, again, the pumping systems that we have, effluent pumps, we were touched on that slightly a few minutes ago. The effluent pumps can suck up certain items too. And I replaced effluent pumps because of feminine hygiene products. They basically, the impeller will suck that up if it drains through the tank, gets to the pump chamber, and you've instantly got pump failure. And when I open the lid, the pump is trying to work, and steam just rolls up out because the water is boiling now because it's so, like, the pump isn't spinning. So yeah, there's all kinds of unique situations out there, but again, it's all how you maintain and look after the system. I always emphasize the 3-year pumping, contrary to what sometimes people think. Oh, the pump guys are just telling me to pump it every 3 years. They just want my $400. That's not the case. You really got to pump it on a regular maintenance practice to make sure that the solids don't accumulate to a level that they're going to start leaving the tank and going to the septic field. So you don't want sludge and build up going to the field. You just want liquids, effluent.
I imagine that would ruin the field.
It does, and it clogs up your gravel beneath the pipe, and then it creates a biomat or an anaerobic bacteria growth on the surface of the septic sand, which is your filter, and then the water can't penetrate, can't go down through. So that's where septics will become saturated when the water can't drain. It's no different than putting a tarp over the top of sand and then saying, let's try to see if the water goes through it. It just doesn't happen. So anyways, one thing I will add, though, that is very beneficial, and I encourage all my clients to do this. This became a regulation in 2013 that effluent filters are now a thing that have to be installed on new installs or replacement systems. So I always tell people, put an effluent filter on your septic system, on your outlet pipe, because it stops any of those things from draining out to the field. And the purpose of the filter is, it's just a screen. That's all it is. Drops into the outlet T, and it is a thing that you do have to pull up and rinse off with a garden hose. People are like, oh my God, I got to do that. And yeah, it's not the end of the world that you just grab it. You don't even need a glove because it's above the level of the sewage that there's a nice little handle. You pick it up, hose it off, 30 seconds later, put it back in. It's free flow again. But it's great because it collects the grease, the hairs, the fat deposits, anything that could drain out of the tank. And it saves the life and extends the longevity of your septic.
That's so funny you say that, but like, it's easy to do because I have a fiance that refuses to take out the green bin.
Oh, dear.
I can't imagine her renting out the effluent filter of a septic system.
It's real easy. I'll put an educational video on my Facebook page for you. Check us out. Like us on Facebook. How to clean your effluent filter, Volume 1.
What is the worst septic you've seen?
The worst one? So the worst one is one that's not draining. You open the lid and sewage boils out at you.
Boils?
Boils out. Literally, you take the lid off that's like airlocked, and then it bubbles out at you. That's a really, really bad system. And I see it a lot in more rural communities, I guess. The further you go outside of the city, the less the systems are likely to be
reliable.
They're not reliable. They're not proper. Because, Uncle Joe put his backhoe up here on the weekend and put a septic system for us in 1976. Well, regulations were different back then. Nobody really had to be licensed. So You'll find lots of creative things. I see lots of them just run into the ditch. I see lots of
into
systems.
The ditch?
Oh, yeah. You've got a tank, and you have a pipe that runs to the gutter. So every time you flush the toilet, no, you don't see toilet tissue in the ditch, but you'll see a flow of water and you smell sewage, and you're like, oh, that's incredible. I wonder if that's where the septic goes. But I always look for plant life too. There's some vegetation that'll indicate sewage leakage, and a couple of the different plants. You'll see a creeping Charlie, goatweed, buttercups, tall buttercup or creeping buttercup. If you see a nice healthy green patch of those, there's a good chance that the septic is probably leaking there. And I can almost call it before I even do a load test or a dye test. I roll up on a site and I look at them like, that looks like there's probably something wrong. And it can cut some inspections pretty short and make them really quick and easy if that's the case. And going back to the rural communities, I'm not saying that all the properties I inspect, the further you go outside of town, you're running into bad things, because I see lots of good, proper systems that were installed, in the 80s, the 90s. Whether they're working properly or not is the question. But, back when the regulations weren't enforced as much and real estate inspections weren't so important, people didn't really care and bought houses where they had pipes that were just discharging untreated sewage. And of course, it's not good because you're contaminating waterways. And it's a terrible thing.
Oh, I can only imagine.
My goodness. But yeah, what's really funny? Like, despite the fact you could say, even in the rural settings, I was looking at a house, and this is why septic system inspections are so important. Not that I'm trying to upsell my services by any means, but this is the importance of it. You can have a home that's 7 years old, 8 years old. I found 4 septic systems that were failures and had calls from clients this year that were less than 10 years old in 2020. And we've replaced 3 of those 4 systems because the client said, well, we just have to do what we have to do. We want to make sure that we have confidence every time we flush the toilet. But, looking at it at a different angle, $624,000 home last week. I did the inspection for the buyer, and the pipe from the septic tank went directly into the cove in the ocean.
What?
It did. And
how old was the house?
The house was probably built about 80 years ago, but it had some serious updates. It was a really nice home.
Okay, so upgrades.
So they've upgraded. The house was literally brand new, and you look at the exterior, interior, you'd never know the age of it other than, going through the basement of it, and it's dirt floor. But the whole idea is you can't judge how a septic system is going to operate based upon age of the home. Based upon the value of the home. Oh, it's a $1 million house, septic should work. No, that doesn't work like that.
No, it doesn't work like that.
And I've even done inspections. I have one agent that I work with in particular. She will inspect new home construction. And believe it or not, we found lots of, and you know what? You were doing the same thing, and that's due diligence on your behalf as an agent. You're looking after your client, and that's a great thing that you do that, because I usually find some sort of issue with new construction. And it's not because of function of the system, it's installation. Sometimes, builders, excavator operators, installers are in a huge rush to get the project completed, to get it to the market, or they've got some deadlines. And there's lots of things that can be, done wrong. I've seen leaky tanks on new installs. I've seen sags. I've seen pipes running uphill when they should be running at the minimum 2% slope. We've seen septic systems that were not topsoiled and seeded because you're technically supposed to have sediment and erosion barrier in place to maintain the septic sand and make sure that it doesn't wash out if you get a heavy rainstorm. So yeah, honestly, again, it's not an upsell of my services, but it's very important to look at a new system, because you're going to find things that, an inspector that does the inspection of the installation won't be able to see.
Okay, here's a question, and I've had this happen before, is the fact that I've had clients doing a septic inspection, and they see a large backyard, and they're thinking, oh, I can put my kid's trampoline on top of it. And I'm thinking, no. Why not put any large, heavy objects on top of the septic?
So trampolines are okay because they're a big diameter item. They're not like a pressure point, let's say. It's got an equal spread of the weight, and they're not really that heavy. And you throw a couple children on it, they do say maximum 250 pounds. I weigh 211. I walk across the septic field. I'm not causing any detrimental effect on it. But, the thing is, so septic systems should not have swimming pools installed on them. We do a lot of locates for clients who want to install pools. We do locates for people who want to install fencing because they don't want to drive posts through the field. But the weight aspect is very important because, believe it or not, the piping in the septic system is only buried between 12 to 18 inches below grade. That's basically what our new systems are for standard right now. That's the only bit of ground cover over the top. So it's not the same as what it used to be. Years ago, septic systems were 4 feet deep. But the problem is, the deeper you go, the closer you get to groundwater table, and a lot of systems would fail prematurely because they're deep. So newer systems are shallow. You drive a vehicle over it, there's a great chance you're gonna maybe sink down and bust your pipes and cause a malfunction. You'll have leakage now. Swimming pools are bad because even though it is an equal distribution of the weight,
The water weight.
yeah, some settling's going to occur. In the overall diameter of maybe a 28-foot round above ground pool, I'd have to guess there's probably going to be 50,000 pounds of water potentially on top of that. And, that's not good to put all that pressure on that one side of the bed, because now it could make the pipe settle on that side. So you're not going to get an equal distribution throughout the field. You're going to get everything running to that side. But, the compression isn't good because, it's eliminating the chance for oxygen to get to your field. And oxygen not only gets to the septic tank and throughout the interior plumbing, but it gets through the lawn, and it helps decompose and break down the sludge accumulation. And it prevents, the failure of systems because there's no airflow. So essentially what you're doing is blocking off the ability for the field to breathe through the lawn. But anyways, I guess there's so many different ways you could look at this that people can then ruin their systems. But I always just tell people, drive over with a lawn tractor, no problem. Take your four-wheeler across it if you have to, but don't do donuts and burnouts. Kids on a trampoline, that's not really going to hurt it, unless you decide that you want to, dig down and start putting pegs in the ground to hold a trampoline. You may damage piping. Fire pits are another no-no. I've dug up septic systems with melted pipes because of
No way.
fire pits on the surface. So yeah, it's one of those areas I just always try to tell people, just try to stay off it the best you can, and don't put a shed on it, and definitely don't plant trees on top of it, because root intrusion will cause system failure as well.
Of course it will.
It just doesn't let the bed drain, and there's lots of cases where pipes have been filled with roots because that's where the water's at. Trees thrive on drinking water. That's where they're going to go. Where's the water? Oh, let's go into the pipes. And now the system's not draining.
Now, I want to bring it back to pumps. Pumping your system once every 3 years, as you've recommended. Yes. Why is that beneficial, and why should someone do that?
So the pumping, the purpose of it is to stay on top of the solids. Solid accumulation within the tank. If you, look at it this way, if you've got a household of 4, solid accumulation under 3 in the 3 year period is going to be pretty typical, and you want to make it disappear before it gets to a point that the tank's carrying capacity is going to say, now stuff is going to start squeezing its way out of the outlet pipe into the septic field. So you don't want that to happen. Prime example, we have a home that hasn't been pumped for 10 years. The solids were right out into the septic field because they had nowhere else to go. They literally look like brownies floating on the surface of liquids. That's the more solids going in, the higher the pan of brownies becomes. So we don't want to see a nice high pile like brownies. We want to see that,
call them brownies.
Everything's decomposing and breaking down, and the sludge sinks to the bottom because that's the degraded and decomposed buildup of solids. So there's 3 levels pretty much in the septic tank. On the top layer, you've got your floaty brownies, basically toilet tissue and solids, human waste combined. Then you've got your level of liquids. So let's say 12 inches of solids. Then you've got your liquids, which probably makes up about 48 inches. And then at the bottom, you've got your settled sludge. And that's the really black, yucky, tar-like stuff. So when the pump truck shows up, the brownies go first. That's what you really want to get rid of. But then he goes to the bottom and takes the sludge. And believe it or not, people have asked me quite a few times, why did they leave water in my tank? I paid to have my septic tank pumped. But the purpose of leaving the liquids is really you're only going to fill your tank back up with liquids, within the next week, because you're going to be running water, showers, dishes, toilets, etc. But you want to leave good bacteria in there. And the good bacteria that you leave in liquid form, helps kickstart the decomposition process and breakdown of everything that's coming in, after the pumping process takes place. But again, you want to stay on top of pumping only for the fact that anything, if it builds up too high, anything's going to leave the tank.
Yeah.
It's just, it becomes overwhelming for the poor septic tank. Just help your tank. Just get that stuff out of there. I'm very adamant about mine. I'm the septic doctor. Come on now. I can stay on top of that stuff. So I pump every 2 years. But I will say this. I have my wife and I. We have 3 small children. One's still in diapers. But I literally feel like my house is Grand Central Station. We've got grandparents at the house at least 2 to 3 times a week. We've got drop-in friends. We've got my wife's girlfriends, my own people pop by, clients.
Should have said boyfriends.
Yeah, oh yeah, my boyfriends. Yeah. I got them all in me. But anyways, it's you can never pump it too much, but I always tell people if it's a household with 2 occupants, husband and wife couple says, "Oh, do I really need to pump it every 3? It's just us and we work every day." You don't have to pump it every 3. It's not that imperative because I've opened up septic tank lids and looked in, and it literally looks like there's nothing in the tank but liquids and the odd piece of tissue floating on the surface because they're never home enough to fill the tank. They're just, they're out working every day. They're home in the evenings, maybe gone on the weekends to the cottage. So they don't have the opportunity to put the loading on the system that my home would with so many people popping by and regular usage and kids and everything else. So, it is based upon
usage,
100%, just as the design of a system is based upon usage for however many bedrooms there are and occupants within the home.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, we haven't talked about cost. So how much does the actual septic system, for you to come out and check a septic system, how much do you cost?
So the price is $375 plus HST. And I will tell you this, it is the best insurance you can ever have when purchasing a home. And the reason I say this is 7 out of 10 homes will have one little flaw with their septic system that needs to be addressed. So for the cost of $375, let's say you need to have a line sag repair corrected from the house to the tank because that minimum 2% slope isn't there. Let's say there's a line sag going out to the field, whereas a 1% slope is required. If you have a belly in the pipe, that's definitely needs to be addressed. So again, let's talk about the pricing of a line sag repair. $400, worst case scenario is $1,000. So if you pay to have an inspection completed to determine if that's the case, well, your inspection paid for itself if we find that problem and the seller addresses that. And typically that's what happens in most real estate transactions. Anything septic related, if it's a problem, it's addressed by the seller for the purchaser. The only things that aren't addressed are typically system upgrades or recommendations, and I usually recommend the filter. That's at your cost. Basically, once you move in, you can do that. So basically, yeah, the $375.
How much to pump?
The pumping job is usually $400 plus HST.
Okay.
And again, that's just a regular maintenance thing every 3 to 5 years based upon household occupancy.
Okay.
I guess other than that, the only other service that we could say that would have to be performed would be to excavate the tank.
Okay.
But again, going back to the original, agreement between seller and purchaser, seller is obligated to make that accessible. So typically the tank is ready for us, but if it's not, we can make arrangements to have that service provided.
That's amazing.
Oh, we do what we can.
Derek, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on.
No problem.
I've learned so much about septics in this last 45 minutes.
It's great, man. Honest to God, I love teaching people. Sometimes I feel like I teach people so much, I might put myself out of business someday because I'm just teaching too much.
How if someone was looking for a septic inspection or a pump, how best to get a hold of you?
So best method of approach is, okay, so my number's found all over Google. You type in Septic Doctor, Halifax Septic Doctor. I'm that guy that pops up. You probably see my picture on my Google ad there. I look like I was kind of cranky in that photograph though, but anyways, that was before the beard and the long hair. So anyways, yeah, that was a couple of years ago. But anyways, you will find my number. It's 902-830-1414. However, given the fact that I'm kind of sort of busy in my up to my elbows in shit.
It's not a bad thing.
It's not always easy for the doctor to answer the phone when he's diagnosing and giving the prognosis of your septic system. So my voicemail has prompted all clients who can't reach me to contact my wife, Kara Hale, at 902-877-0123. And basically, you can book inspections through her. You can leave her a message, send her a text. She's probably better with text because we have 3 screaming children in the background typically, and she doesn't want to answer the phone and give that image of unprofessionalism. So text is probably the best method. She usually gets everything booked in, and yeah, we can make it happen. And we don't mind doing weekends if need be. At the end of the day, it's all about servicing the client, making sure everybody's happy, and making sure that septic system is in good working order.
Derek, man, I can't thank you enough. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Man, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me, buddy.
Let's get a beer.
Let's do it.
All right, buddy.
All right.
Thank you so much for tuning into the show. If you want to get in touch with Derek, you can reach him at 902-830-1414, thesepticdoc@gmail.com, or check our show notes for his website and social media accounts. If you want to get in touch with me, you can reach me at 902-220-7357 or jason.pollock@kw.com. Thanks. Bye.